5 questions that reveal whether you're in a healthy relationship or a toxic one. Ask anyone if they'd want to be in an unhealthy relationship and the answer would be pretty much the same: hell no. But it's not always easy to take a step back and see that your bond is in a bad place. Unhealthy patterns and toxicity can be subtle, says Manhattan-based licensed clinical psychologist Joseph Silona, PsyD. Extreme examples, like physical or verbal abuse, can be easy to recognize, but other types of toxicity are not so easy. Those include constant, subtle passive aggression or backhanded compliments that are intended to insult, diminish, or control you, he says. Jocelyn Charnas, Ph.D., a clinical psychologist in private practice in Manhattan, agrees, noting that it's not always easy for friends to tell if your relationship is off. All relationships are different, and from the outside looking in, you could judge, she says. Toxic relationships usually start out with intense passion and attraction, says Silona, and then behavior slowly becomes disrespectful and controlling. That makes it much more difficult for the person to push back or leave the relationship until it really starts to escalate, he says. If you have doubts, here are 5 questions that can help you gauge whether your relationship is toxic or not. Does your relationship make you feel good? Charnas says this is the most important thing when it comes to judging the quality of your relationship. If your relationship makes you feel great most of the time, it's probably healthy. If it doesn't, you need to take a closer look to find out why that is. There is one caveat, of course. Even a healthy relationship isn't going to make you happy all the time, Charnas says. Your SO may tick you off from time to time out. If you find that fighting has become the norm instead of the exception, that's a sign that something isn't right, she says. Does my relationship make me feel good about myself? While you're ultimately responsible for your own happiness, your partner has the potential to make you feel secure and good about yourself or really crappy. If you feel like you don't measure up to your partner's expectations, Charnas says you need to consider the quality of your relationship and why you're staying in it. We can't base our self-worth on our relationships, but when we recognize that we feel bad more often than we feel good, that's not a good sign, she says. Am I dressing differently than I used to? Your style is bound to change a little bit over time. That's just life. But something is off if you find that you're suddenly dressing a certain way just because your partner wants you to, Charnas says. This could mean dressing more conservatively because your SO doesn't like when you show your body off, or dressing more provocatively because your partner digs that look. Note, this doesn't include wearing something slinky in the bedroom because you know it turns your partner on, or throwing on a dress because you know he loves it. Rather, it's completely changing your style to please your partner. How do I feel before I see my partner? Sure, you're probably not going to have butterflies after being together for a while, but if you're constantly feeling uncomfortable or anxious before you see him, those emotions are big red flags that a relationship isn't healthy, says Silona. Unhealthy and toxic relationships lack trust, which often creates frequent discomfort or outright fear and anxiety. How often do I see my friends now? Compare how much you saw your friends before your relationship started to how much you see them now. Of course, it's pretty normal to disappear into the hole that is your relationship when you first start dating, but beware if that continues past the getting to know you phase. A common dynamic in unhealthy and abusive relationships is control through alienation from friends and family, Silona says. Since talking about your relationship to friends and family puts the spotlight on toxic behavior, abusers often put a lot of energy into isolating their victims from friends and family and undermining those relationships, he says. The results. If one or more of these questions made you think twice about your bond, it's time to take action. While every situation is different, Charnas says most relationships are worth making some effort to repair them. A good place to start is expressing your concerns to your partner, she says. They might not be aware of how they're making you feel. If there is any room for discussion or willingness to work on your issues, then there's hope. But if you raise a concern and you get stonewalled or your SO refuses to listen, that's a sign that things may not be fixable, she says.